Good morning. My name is Jim Hennessy with Montreal County Ag Agency, and today we're going to talk about making summer sausage. Summer sausage, basically, you can case it in a snack pack, which is basically a 2.5, 3-inch casing, or you can go as big as a 4-inch casing. What we're going to do today is we're going to do the snack packs. They're a 2.5-pound casing. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about as far as the meat we're going to use. We're going to make a beef summer sausage. So what I'm using here is basically it's a beef clod, which is the chuck, front shoulder out of as far as steer. And usually they run a little over $3, like 3 1/4 a pound, roughly, to buy. So you can do it fairly cheap. It's good meat. I don't like to use all the trimmings and waste meat. I guess if I'm going to make a product, I want to make sure it's a good product that's got a good quality. And there's some really good muscle characteristics that come out of the front shoulder. First thing we're going to do is, if you look at, and I got a small piece here of the chuck, basically we've got what we call some of that cap fat. It's the stuff that's on the outer side, and it's more tallowy. I will leave all the seam fats as long as they're not the slimy or the silver skin they call. I don't want those in there because it gets stuck behind the grinder plates. It doesn't go through, and it doesn't actually, if it's in your summer sausage, it doesn't taste very good. So we'll take and quick trim this up. Basically, I kind of do it like I'm playing a fish. I'll get underneath and get what I can and start just pulling it off. You can notice it's a little bit on the discolored, and it's probably not going to be real good as far as flavor when it's discolored. The other thing you can watch for is any discolorations, blood clots, things like that, and trim those out. So once you get the beef clod or the chuck trimmed up, this was a boneless one, so we didn't have to take the bones out. Basically, we're trimming off all that cap fat and then trimming up the gristle and any tendons that are soft tendons. We'll pull those out. A lot of that will get stuck as far as behind the grinder. Clean it up, and actually you've got a pretty good chunk of meat. This granted only a portion of that beef chuck. But when you pull it out, there's some good muscles in it. Actually, there's a muscle that comes from the ribeye back into the chuck, and that makes it a real tender. And that's why a lot of people, when they buy beef chuck to do like a roast, it makes a really good roast. So we got it all trimmed up, and then what we'll do is we'll just cube it. And by cubing it, we can just get it so it can go through the grinder, and then we'll grind all that up. And basically, as long as it will fit down the chute, the grinder will take the rest and do it. And if you look at it, I mean, most of that meat's got really good marbling in it. So it's pretty good quality meat as far as that goes. Okay, so the next process that we're going to do is we're going to take on that chuck meat, and like I said, we're using all beef to make an all beef summer sausage. We're basically going to run it through the grinder. And the grinder we're using is a number 32 plate grinder. It's a big bite made by Lem. Actually a really good grinder. You can go to a 22 size plate on it and on a grinder, and they'll work just as well. This one here, if you look up close, it's got a safety guard. So basically when you're grinding, you can't get down in there. And that's why we use the plunger to push the meat down. But for the most part, most of it should feed itself. And I run the on-off with the foot feet. That works really nice as far as by yourself, so you're not sitting playing with the switches. And when you're ready to grind, you can just take and step on it, turn it on. Most time, the auger will grab it. When you drop the meat down in the throat area, the auger will grab it and it shoots it out. You'll notice as the meat's coming out, it's real lean looking. And then The plate on the grinder, it's basically an 1/8 inch plate. I grind it once and I leave it that way. Some people will grind it more times. One of the things they do in the industry, if you'll notice like bolognas and stuff, they'll run it through what they call a blender. And a blender takes and it finally emulsifies it so it's real small and you can't tell what's in the meat. What we're doing is we got high quality meat, so we can leave it a little bigger. We're going to leave it in that 1/8 inch and we're going to run it through once. And traditionally, a lot of people like, as far as summer sausage with more of a coarse and not so finely ground that it looks like a hot dog almost. I mean, because it gets emulsified so much. But we're going to grind this all down with this 1/8 inch plate. For the most part, you'll notice I don't even have to push the plunger behind. It grabs it and shoves it through. Now, a trick a guy can do when you get to the end and you got the last bit of meat, you can make a couple meatballs. And what I do is, you've got meat that hasn't hit the grinder plate or the blades, just shove a couple of meatballs in behind it and it'll actually flush those chunks of meat through the grinder, so that way when you break it down and you pull the meat out of the auger, most everything's ground. The only thing you'd have to pull out is if you've got some tendons, some tissue that won't go through the grinder, you can just pick that out. And everything else is going to be ground. Now, a lot of people ask, as far as equipment, does it pay to buy good equipment, or should I just have a hand grinder? Personally, I feel that if you can take and use, like equipment, like buying a piece every year, it's a lot cheaper, especially when you're doing deer. If you got to take it in somewhere to have it processed, it's anywhere from $250 up to $500, depending on how many different products you make. Basically, if you look at the meat, it's pretty high quality, and you're looking at about an 85-90% lean product there, which will make a really good summer sausage. So our next step is we're going to take this tote with meat, and we'll go ahead and we'll get our brine mixed up, and then we'll mix everything together, and then we can do our stuffing process. Okay, so our next part that we're going to work on is making our brine. We've already trimmed up our beef chuck or the quad. We run it through the grinder at an 1/8 inch plate. We've got the meat waiting to have a brine put in and mixed up so that we can actually get the meat so it's got a good flavor to it. Usually what a lot of people will do is they have all their different spices and they spend a lot of time mixing up all these spices, and it may be minute amounts where, half a teaspoon or so many, like 1 ounce of this, a little bit of that. And it takes a lot of time actually to get your brine mix all put together. It could take you up to half hour by the time you get all those mixes in there. And then you get it all into a wet brine, where you add water. And the other thing is you're going to add sodium nitrate. Sodium nitrate actually is put in the meat. There's a couple of things that it does. First of all, it gives a longer shelf life. It also promotes better color in your sausage. And the last thing is that it kills out a lot of your foodborne pathogens that you'll have, the bacteria and salmonella or anything like that. So you want to use the sodium nitrate to safen up the product also. So it's got 3 real good advantages by having it in there. What I like to do is I will take and actually buy a premix. And I buy like Grandpa Josh's, or the other one you can get is Heller's. And it's kind of cheating in a sense. It's like buying a cake mix, or you can make it from scratch. If I'm in a hurry, I'm going to buy the cake mix, and then I'll add some additives to it. In the cake mix, you can see that it's got pretty much everything in it. When you look at it, it's got, as far as the peppercorns, the cracked peppercorns, and it's got the salt, it's got the dextrose, it's got garlic powder, everything's added in. So it's all already mixed for you. And it's got a little packet in there. You can actually see this one. They call it the pink salt. It's got a little packet, and it's already set up for a 25-pound batch, so you don't have to worry about it. What I'll do is I'll take the sodium nitrate, I'll put it in about a cup of water, warm water, and I get it all dissolved, make sure it's completely dissolved, and then I put it into the mix. That way we don't end up with any spots where we got concentration of sodium nitrite. You want it really mixed in there really nice. And then we'll put the rest of the mix in there with it and get it mixed up. And once we get it all mixed up, then we can pour it on to our meat. But a lot of times, maybe this isn't exactly what you want, just a basic mix. You can add a few things. And a few things that I like to add, I'm one that I like sweet and spicy. I'll add some chipotle powder to it, like a tablespoon or two to a 25-pound batch. Gives a little bit of zing to it. The other thing is people will do is they'll use fennel. Some people like fennel, some people don't. A lot of times in your pizza seasoning, as far as the sausage, there's a lot of fennel in it. I like it, so I add it to it. And usually you'll have to either grind it or you can get the powdered fennel. Sometimes people like to add chopped onion, a little bit of that to it. If you overdo it, it gets a little bit, you got to really like onion if you're going to put a lot of it in. But for a 25-pound batch, I may put like maybe half to a third of a cup of this in with it and add into it. People will talk about, well, you got to have whole peppercorns. If you are eating summer sausage and you're slicing it with your knife and stuff, chances are you're not going to like biting into a whole peppercorn. Older generation that may have dentures, they bite into these, they'll let you know, why do you put that in there? Along with that, we also have what we call mustard seed. Everybody likes mustard seed, except older generation has dentures because mustard seed tends to get between dentures and your gums. Mustard seed is good. It adds a little different texture, plus a little different flavor. And it's one that I like to add in, and I will put basically a half a cup to 25 pounds. Some people go as high as a cup and 25 pounds. It all depends what you like. The other one some may do is they may put minced garlic in. Another product I like to add is I'll put a tablespoon of nutmeg in 25 pounds of summer sausage. Nutmeg, you think about it, you think, well, why would you put that in meat? But actually nutmeg puts pretty good flavor into your meat. And then the last thing I like in my summer sausage is I like to add jalapenos to it. It gives texture, it gives flavor, it gives a little bit of, zest to it along with the chipotle. And to offset that heat that a lot of people are afraid of, I'll add some brown sugar in there. And on the brown sugar, I'll put anywhere from a third to a half a cup of brown sugar per 25 pounds. Some people like to go a little higher. You get it too sweet, and it doesn't taste the best. But that's kind of what I'll do as far as some different ingredients that I'll add in. One last one I want to talk about is you can buy, they call it sausage tang. And when you buy, say, store-bought sausage and it's tangy, got that tang to it, all it is it's you're adding citric acid to it, and that gives it that tangy taste. I don't like putting this in. Not really a big one as far as having summer sausage with that tangy taste to it. But a lot of times in the big industry, if they've got an off taste or something, to cover it up, they'll use citric acid actually to cover up and give it a different taste. So as far as product-wise, we'll mix all this, put it in our bowl. We'll use on 25 pounds, roughly a pint and a half to a quart of water. And I usually use warm, so I get my sodium nitrite mixed up, and then I'll add the rest of the ingredients and get it all into a nice solution. And then once I do that, I pour it onto our meat. Once we get all that mixed up, and you want to thoroughly mix that. So when you have your meat with all that spice, if you don't thoroughly mix it, you'll get hot spots where you get more spice and then some spots that have no spice. But make sure it's thoroughly mixed. You can either do it by hand. When I'm teaching kids a class, I make them do it by hand. Otherwise, I'll add an attachment, a mixer onto the grinder and just let it mix itself for about 10, 15 minutes. Okay, one of the things I forgot to mention as far as when we were mixing up product, a lot of people talk about smoking as far as their summer sausage. In North Dakota, like today, for example, it's a 40 below temperature outside, and when you got smokers sitting outside, you never get it up to temperature where you want. So I'll use different alternatives. I'll use a convection oven, and you can cook it down in that for about 3.5, 4 hours roughly. And I just set it at about as low a temperature as I can get it, which is 160. And then we cook it long and low. What it'll do that way is you don't end up with the meat getting burnt or anything on the outside and then being raw on the inside. We want to cook it long and slow. But one of the things I'll do is I'll add a dry smoke. And you can buy Legs, for example, makes a dry smoke. This packet will do roughly 100 pounds, so it's 2 ounces per 25 pounds. And I mix that into the brine and then put it into the sausage itself. This sausage mix actually, when we mixed it all up, we used 2 ounces of dry smoke. We did a 1/4 cup chopped onion along with the Grandpa Josh mix. We used 2 cans of the jalapenos in there. And then we run those basically through and they get ground up also. We also use some whole fennel. We put about 1/8 of a cup, which is great plenty. Myself, I'll use 2-3 tablespoons. And then we put a tablespoon of nutmeg in there. And then chipotle, we put 2 tablespoons, which is great plenty. It'll give it some heat, but it also gives it a nice flavor. And then we use the mustard seed. They put a cup in there. So there's quite a bit of mustard seed in there, and you can see that when you look at the product. And the last thing is putting in the brown sugar. And they put in a 1/2 cup of that. Product's all in the stuffer. So we'll basically back this up and we'll get it loaded here quick. This is a 10 to 12 pound stuffer. And basically it's set up with a foot pedal so one person can stuff and do it all themselves. And what we're going to use to put the stuff in is our casings. And our casings are basically a collagen paper type casing. Like I said, they're about 2.5, 3 inches in diameter. They're about a 2.5 pound casing. So it'll take 2.5 pounds of product that we can stuff in there. They do have real fine breather holes in them. And all the breather hole does is let the excess moisture out. But you can also, this was already pre-mixed and you can look at it. Basically, you can see the mustard seed in it. It's also got jalapenos in it. It's got the nutmeg and things like that, plus the basic mix. And actually, it's, you look at it, it's a pretty good product, pretty lean. And we're going to just take and we'll load our stuffer up. So basically, this is a limb, and it's about a 10, 12 pound stuffer. And we'll just fill up the whole cavity. All this should fit in. Like I had mentioned on the casing, it's a collagen paper casing. So it's, the paper part, it's non-edible. As far as collagen casings, you can eat them, but when you mix collagen paper, it's non-edible. So basically, it's going to be peeled off. You'll notice the string on the one end. It's just basically a string to hang for the smoker. If you're not using them in the smoker and you put them in a convection oven, you don't need it. We'll tie the other end. Some people will take hog rings and flip them on the other ends. I actually like to tie them because I think I can get a fuller casing in and also make sure it's tied good and tight. I like to take the casings when we're doing, as far as in a class, just soak them in water so they got some little bit of flexibility to them. In the industry, when I worked in the industry, all the casings went on dry. When they'd go onto the big stuffers, they were all dry and we just filled them in moisture. Actually went in them. But we'll just take and slide that casing on. Your stuffing tube can be the big 2-inch tube, or it can be basically any tube you want on there. Your meat's ground down. The meat is real dry. You probably get one bigger tube. I usually like to add a little extra water so it stuffs a lot nicer. And I'm gonna basically, when I stuff, we'll get everything set up. So we're ready to basically stuff. We have our 2.5 pound casing on there. It's collagen with paper casing. We got it on a stuffer that's electric stuffer. And the reason I like the electric stuffer is a lot of times I do a lot of the stuffing and stuff all by myself, and I can't crank the stuffer and fill the casing all by myself, where I can do this with a foot feed, and all I gotta do is step on it and we start filling. What you'll notice on the casing is you want to fill that casing as full as you completely can. And as it fills, you want to make sure you put some back pressure so it's filling. You don't want to blow that casing. But if you can fill it well enough, you'll notice these breather holes. Any of the fat content may squeeze through them. Then you know you're getting it full enough. So we get to the end. Basically what we'll do is we twist it off, and then we work our casing to make sure we get it as full and as tight as we can. We want that meat in there so there's no air pockets. We want everything filled up. If you have air pockets, what happens is any of the grease as you're cooking down will go to those air pockets, and then you get spots where it's just grease. And you don't want that, because when your fat breaks down and goes to a air pocket area, then you got issues. You'll notice on here, there's lines of little breather holes, and some of the fat or meat product that's real fine will squeeze through. When you start getting that, you know that you got that casing tight enough. So next thing we're gonna do is, once I got it tight, I got the top twisted down, we'll just take some regular cotton thread, and I will cut off a chunk about 8 inches long, and I want to tie that.